History remembers him as a titan. The bastard duke who crossed the sea, crushed the Anglo-Saxons, and seized the crown of England. He was William the Conqueror, a man whose name became synonymous with power, iron will, and unshakable authority. But while his life was the stuff of legends, his death, well, that was the stuff of nightmares. Imagine a funeral so disastrous that it makes modern tabloids look tame. We're talking about a death filled with agony, a corpse abandoned by its own family, a ceremony interrupted by arson and lawsuits, and a finale so gruesome it literally cleared the room. Today, we aren't talking about how William lived. We are going to explore the horrifying, chaotic, and downright explosive fate of his remains. To understand the horror of the end, we have to look at how it began. It is the summer of 1087. William is 59 years old, a significant age for a medieval warrior. But this wasn't the fit, agile young duke who rode into Hastings. The history books tell us that in his later years, William had become immensely corpulent. He was a big man, heavy and imposing, and his weight was becoming a serious problem. Despite his size, he was still fighting. The King of France had made a crude joke about William's weight, likening him to a pregnant woman, and in a rage, William launched a scorched earth campaign near Mantes, France. As he rode through the burning ruins of the town, disaster struck. His horse, perhaps spooked by the heat or embers, reared violently. The heavy king was thrown forward, his stomach slamming with brutal force against the iron pommel of his saddle. The impact was catastrophic. It ruptured his internal organs, likely tearing his intestines. In an era before antibiotics or surgery, this was a death sentence, a slow, agonizing one. William didn't die on the battlefield. He was carried back to his capital in Rouen, Normandy, where he lay in agony for weeks. This wasn't a quick exit, it was a lingering, septic decline. As the toxins from his ruptured organs seeped into his bloodstream, the king drifted between lucidity and delirium. You would expect the deathbed of the most powerful man in Europe to be a scene of solemn respect, surrounded by loyal family and weeping subjects. It was anything but. His eldest son, Robert, was in open rebellion. His other sons were already racing off to secure their inheritances before the king had even taken his last breath. The atmosphere in the room wasn't one of mourning, it was one of panic and opportunism. The conqueror was dying, but the sharks were already circling. On September 9, 1087, the king finally expired. And what happened next is honestly shocking. You might assume a royal body would be immediately prepared for a state funeral. Instead, the moment William's heart stopped, total chaos erupted in the priory. The wealthy nobles in attendance fled instantly, riding hard for their estates to protect their lands from the expected political turmoil. That left the household servants. Seeing no one in charge, they didn't begin the funeral preparations. Instead, they began to loot. They stole the silver, they stole the furniture, they stole the linen. They even stripped the king's body of his royal robes and jewelry. The man who had owned all of England was left stark naked, dumped on the cold stone floor of the priory, while his servants ran off with his clothes. For hours, the body of the great King William lay on the floor, abandoned and exposed. It was a humiliating calm before the storm. Eventually, a lowly country knight named Herluin entered the room. He was horrified by what he found. It wasn't a bishop or a prince who stepped up to save the king's dignity, it was this minor knight. Herluin paid for the funeral expenses out of his own pocket because the royal treasury had been locked down or looted. He arranged for the body to be embalmed, though by this point, decomposition had already started, and hired a cart to transport William to the city of Cannes. William had requested to be buried at the Abbaye aux Hommes, the magnificent church he had built years earlier as penance for his marriage. It was a long journey down the river Seine and overland, and all the while, the bacteria inside the king's damaged gut were multiplying rapidly. The procession finally arrived in Cannes, and for a moment, it seemed like William would get a shred of dignity. The abbots and monks came out in full procession to meet the body. The townspeople gathered to pay their respects. And then, history threw another curveball. Just as the coffin was being wheeled into the town, a fire broke out in one of the houses. In the tightly packed, timber-framed streets of a medieval city, fire was a terrifying beast. The flames spread instantly. The crowd that had gathered to mourn the king immediately panicked and ran to save their own homes. Even the clergy fled to fight the blaze. Once again, William's corpse was left largely alone, sitting on a cart in the middle of a burning city. The conqueror was playing second fiddle to a house fire. Eventually, the fire was contained, and the monks returned soot-stained and exhausted to finish the job. They dragged the body into the Abbaye aux Hommes. The eulogies began. The Bishop of Evreux stood up and gave a moving speech about William's conquests and his piety, asking the congregation to pray for his soul. But just as the bishop asked if anyone had any objections, a man's voice rang out from the back of the church. It was a local landowner named Asselin Fitzarthur. He wasn't there to mourn, he was there to sue. He shouted that the very ground the church was built on had been stolen from his father by William years ago. He forbade the burial, invoking an ancient Norman law called the Clameur de Harrow. The service ground to a halt. The bishops tried to hush him, but neighbors confirmed Asselin's story. William, the man who gave away half of England to his knights, had died on stolen land. In the middle of the funeral, the bishops had to haggle with Asselin. They paid him 60 shillings on the spot for the grave site, promising more later, just so they could get the king in the ground. With the fire out and the lawsuit settled, it was finally time to lower the body into the stone sarcophagus. But there was one massive problem that no one had accounted for. Remember, William was a large man to begin with. But after weeks of dying from internal rupture, followed by days of decomposition in the summer heat, his body had bloated significantly due to the buildup of gases. The stone sarcophagus, carved weeks earlier based on his living measurements, was now too small. The monks, exhausted and desperate to end this cursed day, decided to force the issue. They tried to squeeze the king's body into the narrow stone space. They pushed. They shoved. And then, the unthinkable happened. Under the pressure, the swollen abdomen of the king burst open. The explosion released weeks of pressurized, putrefied gas and decomposing matter into the church. The stench was reportedly so instantaneous and so overpowering that the incense smoke couldn't hide it. Mourners gagged, priests fainted, and people ran for the doors. The funeral of the great William the Conqueror ended with a hurried, mumbled prayer as the clergy retched, desperate to escape the smell of their own king. You might think that after the body was finally sealed under a stone slab, William could rest in peace. But history had other plans. For a few centuries, he lay undisturbed. But in 1562, during the French Wars of Religion, a group of Calvinist rebels stormed the Abbaye aux Hommes. They weren't interested in history, they were looking for treasure. They smashed open William's tomb, expecting to find gold and jewels. Instead, they found bones. Disappointed and angry, the mob scattered the king's remains. They threw his bones around the church and destroyed the monument. For years, the bones of the man who conquered England were lost, kicked around, or taken as macabre souvenirs by locals. Years later, when the dust settled, monks tried to gather what was left. They managed to recover only one solitary bone, a femur, or thigh bone. This single bone was reburied under a new monument. But even that wasn't the end. During the French Revolution in 1793, the tomb was desecrated again. The revolutionaries, hating anything to do with monarchy, smashed the tomb once more. However, miraculously, the thigh bone survived the chaos, likely because it was hidden or overlooked. Today, if you visit the beautiful Abbaye aux Hommes in Cannes, you will see a simple, modern marble slab marking the grave. It reads Guillemus Conquestor. But beneath that stone lies only that single thigh bone. The rest of the mighty king, his heart, his hands, the head that wore the crown is gone, lost to the winds of history, victims of looting, riots, and time itself. So, the next time you think you're having a bad day, just remember William the Conqueror. He was the most feared man of his age, yet he died in agony, was stripped naked by his servants, upstaged by a fire, sued at his own funeral, and finally exploded in front of his subjects. It's a grim reminder that no matter how much power you hold in life, death is the one conqueror that eventually takes us all. If you enjoyed this bizarre slice of history, do me a favor, hit that like button so this video doesn't get lost in the algorithm like William's bones. Let me know in the comments, do you think this was bad luck or karma for the brutal way he ruled? Make sure to subscribe and ring the bell for more dark history stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.